So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Travis. He's an account executive with Kinney Insurance Agency, which is officially based in Milton, but has offices around the Chittenden County area and Franklin County as well. And he's been in the insurance business for over 10 years and with Kinney for 6. He's done this seminar for us previously, and I know we'll answer all your questions, and we'll give you an overview of insurance, whether it's personal, business. He's going to touch on those topics and ask your questions as needed. Okay, Travis, take it away. Thank you for coming. Thank you for everybody for coming.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Rachel, for taking care of everything and getting this all set up. Like John said, I work for Kinney Insurance. We do have 4 offices in the area: Milton, St. Albans, South Hero, and recently acquired the Bodily Insurance Agency in Burlington. So we do have a Burlington office. We are a 3rd-generation family-owned independent insurance agency. So what that means is we work with multiple companies, not just one, to shop insurance needs. So today, the outline, I do want it to be free-flowing. Like John said, insurance isn't very exciting, so we want to try to answer your questions and make it very personal for you, so you can stay engaged and get the questions that you have answered. There's 6 types of insurance that I want to touch on. There's 3 that are really important that I'm going to focus more time on, and then there's 3 others that I'm just going to kind of touch a little bit so you have an education about those. But probably not get into a lot of detail. So from a question standpoint, I'm going to cover a coverage. If you have questions about that coverage, let's have an open dialogue at that point. Let's not wait till the end, so everything can be fresh in your mind. And I also just want everyone to know every business is a little different and unique. So your situation might be a little different than someone else's when it comes to insurance needs. So I'll do my best in this environment to answer those questions. So the first piece of insurance I want to talk about is general liability insurance. And to use an analogy of a house, general liability really is the foundation of any insurance program that you're going to have for your business. The vast majority of businesses out there need to start with general liability. And what general liability insurance is it protects you and your business if you hurt someone or you damage someone's property. So a lot of times folks start a business and the first time they think about insurance is when either a landlord, when they're getting ready to sign a lease agreement, or a customer asks for proof of insurance. And at that point is usually when the dialogue starts and I get a phone call saying, hey, we need insurance. So when you sign a tenant agreement, the general liability insurance is going to protect the person that you're signing that agreement with if you damage the property. So anyone who's renting a storefront, a restaurant, an office space, now venues are really requiring it. If you're doing trade shows, for folks that are in the craft world, a lot of farmers markets now are requiring you to have general liability insurance. And the reason being is if you do damage to their structures, their facility, they want to make sure that you have coverage in place to pay for any of those damages. The other part of general liability insurance is bodily injury. So again, if you have an office, if you have a restaurant, store, if you have any facility where people are coming in to see you at your place of business, if they were to get injured at that facility, your general liability insurance is going to protect for that bodily injury. So if you don't have general liability insurance, you would have to pay for these things out of pocket. You would have to handle the cost of any medical bills or property damage that someone might have because of your actions. So that's why general liability is really the foundation. That's what 98% of the businesses are going to require you have general liability insurance to move forward with either working with clients, signing a tenant agreement. If you have people that come to your house, I have a lot of contractors. If you're having anyone do work for you, you should always ask for proof of insurance as well, because that gives you an extra layer of protection. And that's why venues are going that route. Instead of a venue, having an event, trade shows, for instance, if you have a booth at a trade show, instead of them wanting to pay out of pocket if there's damage, they want all the people that are going there to have coverage. So that's where you're going to start hearing about general liability. So that's your baseline. Those limits start at $1 million. The industry standard is $1 million. So if anyone asks you for proof of insurance, they're probably going to ask you for $1 million. And the reason they're doing that is just because that's what the industry has decided is really the standard. They probably got someone told them, this is what you should ask for, and that's why they ask for it. You can go under $1 million, but again, we always recommend $1 million just because that's what most people are going to require. You can go to $2 or $3 million in liability coverage. But for most people, $1 million is going to be adequate. And as your business grows and expands is when we can have conversations about whether your liability limit should grow and expand as well. The other thing that's covered with general liability is your finished product. So if you're a carpenter and you put a deck on someone's house, 3 weeks later, they go out, step on that deck, a board falls out, they get hurt, they're going to come back to you for faulty craftsmanship, for injury. Well, your general liability insurance covers you for completed product and operations. So again, if you have to file a claim, that's what general liability insurance will cover for you. One of the other questions that a lot of people ask is, well, how much does it cost? It varies from industry to industry. And there's two big components with calculating general liability costs. The type of business that you run, the more exposure you have, the riskier the industry, obviously the more expensive the insurance is going to be. And the other factor is how much business are you conducting? So if you're a carpenter who has 5 jobs a year, your insurance obviously is going to be less than a carpenter who does 100 jobs a year. So when we're evaluating your insurance needs, and the insurance agent's going to ask you a lot of questions, one of the things they will ask you is, what's your revenue for the year? If you're a startup, you might not know, you can project, but give a good estimate, and that will help determine the cost. Some companies, depending on the size of your business, will audit you every 3 to 5 years. So as your business grows, they might send a form every 3 to 5 years that says, hey, we need an update of your business operations. Where are you in your revenue? And you might see your premiums increase over time as your business grows, because the risk of your business is growing as well, the more customers that you have. So those are the big cost factors there. If you run a business out of your home, a lot of times people ask, well, does my homeowners cover me? It depends on the type of work you do. So if you have a business where you don't have a lot of customer interaction, you don't have people coming into your business, let's just say you have a home office that you work out of, a lot of times you can get some additional coverage from your homeowner's policy for that. But if you do get into a situation where you have a lot of foot traffic, or you're actually going out and working at someone else's home or business, then your homeowners really isn't going to cover you that much for that type of coverage. So if you are working at a home and you have homeowners insurance, you could start with them to see if you're covered. But depending on, again, your type of business, you would probably need to get a business policy. Now, in regards to structuring your policy, this is a very important element. You want to make sure your business insurance reflects your business name. So if you're doing business as a sole proprietor, so say, I was just Travis Spencer, DBA, Travis Spencer Insurance, I'd want to make sure that my business insurance is titled properly. If you have an LLC, we want to put the business in the name of an LLC. We want to put the insurance in the name of the LLC. You just want to make sure that everything is titled the correct way. The reason being is, it's not fun, but if there's a way to get out of something, people will look for a way to get out of it. So when you're titling your business, when you're titling, make sure everything matches up. So there's no gray area for someone to come back and say, well, nope, this insurance is under your name, but your business is this. So we're not going to cover you for that. So when you're setting these things up, or if you have changes, because a lot of times you might set up a DBA, and then as your business grows, you evolve into an LLC. You got to make sure that you're having that communication with your insurance agent so they know to change those things as well. So it's just very important to understand titling when you're sitting down and having that discussion about insurance. So to recap, general liability, property damage, and bodily injury that you might cause to someone else is the reason why you would have that general liability coverage. And again, that's going to be the vast majority of businesses. That's your starting point. There's the rare individual who works from home, never leaves, never has customers coming in, doesn't really have a general liability risk. They might not need it. But again, if you're going out of the home, if you're doing events, if you're going into customers' houses or places of business, or you have people coming to you, that's really going to be the key indicator that you need general liability. The next piece, before I move into professional, does anyone have a question about general liability in general, I guess?
Travis, can you just comment on, you were talking about liability insurance from a business standpoint, but should people have just liability insurance anyway?
Yes. So, and this is liability. We live in a society, unfortunately, where there is a lot of lawsuits. There's a lot of litigation that goes on. And this is something that's also included in your renters. If you're a renter and you have renter's insurance, you have personal liability coverage. If you're a homeowner and you have home insurance, you have personal liability. And this is, and I know this is for business structure, but this is a topic that I really get passionate about, is people that rent who don't have renter's insurance really are putting themselves at a lot of risk, because renter's insurance does have liability coverage. So what does that mean? If you have, let's say you have a dog and you're a renter, and someone's walking by and the dog bites someone, you're liable. And if you don't have insurance, you're going to be paying for those damages out of pocket. If you have kids and your kid's in the backyard and they're throwing a ball around and they break a window, you're liable. So there's a lot of things in life where we take on liability. And by having liability insurance, whether it's personal coverage through a home or renter's policy or your business policy, it makes good sense to have that liability coverage. I had a scenario for renters, a gentleman who had an apartment, left his water running, water overran the sink, caused about $1,200 worth of damage to the property. We actually put a claim against his renters, and the renter's policy paid the landlord to fix the leak. So these are reasons why you want to carry liability coverage just in your day-to-day life as well as your business, because there are a lot of risks out there.
Travis, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Thanks for doing this today. It's good to see
No problem.
you.
Nice to see you again.
Thanks. I'm curious, on the opposite end, if somebody were to file a claim against somebody's insurance, how would that play out? How would that look?
Yep. So the insurance also pays for your defense. So basically, there's a built-in level of coverage where there's medical payments coverage, there's coverage for property damage to a property that you're renting. Those are kind of lower level coverages built in the policy. So let's say someone walks into your store, they slice their arm on a counter, let's say, and they have to go to the hospital, and it's like $2,000. The policy would just pay the bill. And what we usually say, that's kind of like good faith money in the policy. If there's a more serious damage or more serious injury or more serious damage that's done because of your actions, then basically we would file a claim and the claims department would investigate. Usually be like a landlord or an individual filing against you. And it works the same way. The claim is submitted through the insurance company. They'll have a claims adjuster. If it gets to a trial, if it gets to the point where someone's actually suing you, the insurance company will pay for an attorney to defend you in court. And again, like everything with insurance, they will determine, is it worth going to court or is it worth paying for the damages and just calling it a day? But the claims process is pretty much the same, whether it's a small claim or a large claim. It just matters. It basically will just, if it's larger, it's just going to be a determination of, does this go to trial or is this something that can be settled prior to that? But the insurance policy will back you till the end of that claim. They're not going to, it's not a situation where like, oh, well, it reached a certain point, we're done. They follow through all the way to the end. So if that means attorneys, if that means a dragged out lawsuit, then that's what they'll have to do.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else on general liability? So the next piece of the liability insurance coverage is professional liability. Now, this one isn't as frequently used, and depending on what your profession is, you might not need it at all. And depending on what you do, this might be the only one you need. You might not need general liability. Professional liability picks up any financial damages that you do. So general property damage, personal injury, professional is financial damage. So what does that mean? Scenario, and the types of people that would have professional are attorneys, real estate agents, insurance agents, accountants, engineers, architects, anyone that does consulting work. If you are giving professional advice to a client, you're at risk for potential financial impact to that client. So let's say you're a social media, you're a marketing consultant, and you have a client and you handle their social media accounts. So let's say you put something that isn't factual on one of the social media accounts and it has a negative impact on their business. They could then turn around and say, because of your consulting work and your actions, you cost our company X amount of dollars, and come after you for financial impact. That isn't covered under general liability. So again, if you don't fall under those types of businesses, you might not need, if you're running a restaurant or you have a retail store or you're a landscaper or a cleaner, you might not necessarily have the need for professional liability. But if you're getting into the business of where you're giving professional advice, professional liability is going to be something you're going to want to look at. For me as an insurance agent, we carry professional liability. It's also known as E&O, errors and admissions insurance, or if you're familiar with people in the medical field, malpractice insurance. And we carry it. So a scenario for us in the insurance world, we have a customer that comes in, they want to buy auto insurance, they fill out the paperwork, they give me a check, they leave, my phone rings, I get distracted, I don't submit the policy. I never issue the policy. A couple of weeks go by, they're now getting an accident. There's financial damage to them. They now need to pay to get their car fixed. They might have medical bills. They might need to pay the other party. Well, the problem is they don't have insurance because I never submitted the paperwork. So my professional liability insurance would then pay for all of those damages because it was my professional negligence that caused the issue and caused them not to have coverage. This wasn't a situation where they came into my office and slipped and fall and had an injury. I didn't damage their property personally. This was just my professional negligence, which is why they had that financial loss. So again, any consultant work, real estate agents, anything along those lines, professional liability is really important. This also might come in for people who do work from home. So if you're a consultant and you never physically go to your customers, you never have customers come to you, you do everything remotely, well, you might not need general liability, but you're probably going to need professional, because as a consultant and giving people advice, that's going to be something that you're not going to get this coverage under general liability. And again, if you're handling something for a client and they have a financial impact, they could come after you. And like Simeon said, it's a lawsuit. It could be a big claim. And without this type of coverage, you'd be paying for that and defending that on your own. Now, the one thing I didn't talk about in regards to pricing, every company is a little different as far as every business is how much your insurance is going to cost. The other thing too is every company is a little different on what type of insurance they will write. Not every insurance company writes every type of business. If you're a high-risk business, it's a lot harder to find coverage. If it's an everyday business, something you're going to find walking down Church Street, then usually we don't have any problems. So to give people an idea, I wrote down a couple premiums for some just general business types that I've insured. So for, let's say, a residential cleaning company, the general liability I have a couple cleaners, it's about $600 for the year. For carpenters and landscapers, depending on their size, I've got a handful that I work with. You're looking at anywhere from $1,200 to $1,500 for the year. And again, this is just general liability. This isn't paying for employees or property or anything like that. And then I also have a videographer who does videos for people to use either as a commercial or put on social media. And his general liability is about $1,000 for the year. So that just gives you an idea. You really don't get into several thousand in general liability unless you're talking about a very large risk, multiple locations, multiple, a lot of employees, high value, revenue each year. Most people you're going to see either in the mid hundreds to maybe 2,000 or 3,000, again, depending on the risk and the type of business that you're doing. So that's professional and general liability. This is what most people are going to start their insurance with. This is the most important piece. If you got the email with the handouts, there's a one pager that talks about the difference between general and professional liability, so you can have a better understanding of that. But when you're starting your business or when you're having that conversation with your insurance agent, this will be the first foundation piece to that. So before I move on to the next piece, the next three items are kind of high level. We'll just touch on those, but does anyone have any liability questions? I do see a hand raised.
Rachel, do you know who that is?
I'm not sure, and it looks like they are muted. I'm putting in a request that they unmute themselves. So if you have your hand raised and you'd like to speak, you're going to need to unmute yourself on your end. There you go. Oh, wait. Or maybe type it in the chat if the sound isn't working. That could be another way to put questions forward. Lowered your hand for you. So if the question still remains, feel free to put it forward. It looks like maybe if there's any other questions, we could move forward with that right now.
Okay, well, I can move forward to the next one, and as questions come up, we can definitely stop. So the next line of coverage would be commercial auto insurance. This isn't going to impact most people. But if you have a business that is in delivering goods, individuals, taxi services, or if your business is a courier, or if your business in a contractor standpoint, if you're delivering your goods to a job site. So if you're a carpenter and you have to bring supplies to a job site, those are the types of businesses that really need to have commercial auto. If you're just an individual who's going to visit a customer on a call, you're going to their office back and forth, and you're not driving customers around or you're not driving product around, it's just yourself going to meetings, you really don't need commercial auto. Your regular auto insurance is going to protect you and cover you for that type of stuff. The other rule of thumb is if you decide to wrap your car, that's usually a good indicator that you should probably get commercial auto insurance. If you're putting your logo or any type of signage on your vehicle, that's a sign you should probably get commercial auto insurance. But for like myself, I go out to see clients, I go out to take pictures of homes. I don't have a commercial auto policy. It's just me and my car, and it's a function of my day-to-day operations. But if I had, let's say, multiple retail stores and I was bringing product from one store to another in a van or something like that, you would want to look at getting commercial auto insurance for that. But unless you really are a courier delivering goods, delivering individuals, or delivering supplies to a job site, in most cases, you do not need commercial auto. One of the reasons you would want commercial auto is just it gives you a little bit more protection. Again, commercial auto coverage can go up to $1 million in liability, where most personal auto policies don't go that high. So I would recommend that if you do have this type of business operation that requires commercial auto, that's one of the advantages. It is more expensive. So a lot of people will just say, I'll just stick with my personal, which in most cases will be fine. But as in anything, as soon as you have a claim is when usually the insurance companies start peeling back the onion and realize that you should probably have a commercial auto policy, not a personal auto policy. But again, for most people, regular auto insurance is going to be fine for your day-to-day unless you fall under those other guidelines. But that's a conversation I definitely have with an insurance agent. If you're not comfortable or if you feel like you're in a gray area, have that conversation. But for most people, commercial auto isn't going to be a big necessity. Any questions on commercial auto before I move on to the next? Okay.
I've got a question, Travis. So people that operate like a Uber or Lyft business, maybe they're doing it part-time, maybe it's full-time for them. Do they have to get that, or is that something that's provided by the larger organization?
So Uber and Lyft and DoorDash, it's there's a lot of gray area with all of those part-time services. And the one thing with the insurance world is we're very slow to evolve when it comes, I mean, technology and the different things that are going on, you know, like we just had an internal conversation about e-bikes because e-bikes are becoming more and more popular. Well, it's going to take the insurance industry probably 10 to 15 years to figure out how that works. But with Lyft and Uber, the vast majority of your personal auto companies are not big fans. There's a handful of companies out there that will write Lyft and Uber drivers on a personal auto policy. One of the big guidelines is it can't be your primary job. So if all you do is drive Lyft or Uber, you're probably going to have to look for a commercial auto policy. If you do it part-time, there's, like I said, there's 4 or 5 companies out there that are comfortable with that. And then the rest of the insurance world that I'm familiar with, they're not comfortable with people doing delivery. The reason being is there's really 3 or 4 phases to, let's say, Uber or Lyft. So you're driving and you have the app on, you're fine under the normal, your personal insurance world, they're comfortable because you're really not doing anything. Well, now you get a call. So now you got to go pick someone up. So here's really the second phase. First phase, you're driving out. Second phase, you have someone that you need to go pick up. So now you're technically on the Uber clock, if you will. So your personal auto insurance now starts to get a little concerned about what's going on in the frequency. Now, when the individual gets in your vehicle, that's the next phase. So Lyft and Uber give you good coverage while someone is in your car. Their coverage is not good to the point where someone gets into or post, getting out of your vehicle. So when you have that rider in your car, Uber and Lyft give you good quality coverage. Your regular insurance will not cover you at that point. But where the gray area happens is now you dropped the passenger off and there's this gray area of now they're getting out of your vehicle. When does it stop? When does it end? Oh, they get out of your car and they trip on the curb. Okay, was this you? So there's all these variables now where a lot of insurance companies are just saying, we don't want to deal with it. But I know, like I said, the State Farms, the Progressives, some of the larger insurance companies will endorse your personal auto policy to do those types of things. And they're willing to take that risk, where a lot of other insurance companies are now just saying, we don't want anything to do with it. Now, the downside is a lot of people, I don't think, realize that. I think a lot of people are under the impression that their auto insurance is going to cover them, regardless of what's happening. So I do know a lot of people don't call their insurance carrier and say, hey, I'm driving for Lyft now. How does that impact me? And unfortunately, what will happen is usually what happens in the insurance world is there's like a 1 strike and you're done rule. So if you're driving Lyft and your personal insurance company doesn't know that, they'll probably pay that initial claim, and then they will probably move on from you as an insured. So if this is something you are doing as a side business, it's always good to have that conversation. And I tell people, yes, it'll probably impact your insurance. You might have to pay more, but at the end of the day, it's better that they understand and you're paying accordingly than to have a situation where your insurance company just says, we don't want to do business with you anymore. And then you're scurrying around to find insurance. But if it is, to your bigger point, if it is a full-time job, you really would want to look at a commercial policy because your personal insurance really isn't designed for, because it's just more exposure. It's more risk. I mean, you're now out driving around with higher frequency than if you were just going to your place of business.
Do you have a sense, I don't want to put you on the spot too much, but do you have a sense what a range or an average might be if somebody were doing that full time and they had to get a commercial?
It really would depend on the vehicle. And that's going to be the biggest thing, the vehicle and the driving record.
Mm-hmm.
So, in my experience, for people going from a personal auto to a commercial auto policy, it's usually a couple $100 more a year. So that's a good starting point. So if you're paying $800 a year for your regular policy, you might see it go up to over $1,000, $1,100, $1,200 if you have to go to a commercial policy.
Would it be roughly the same scenario if somebody were doing like Instacart, where they're just transporting products and not people?
Yeah, any of those delivery services, because I mean, with Lyft and Uber, obviously there's a personal injury exposure because you got someone in your vehicle. But the bigger thing with, Instacart or any of, even DoorDash, because you're not transporting individuals, it's just, again, it's a frequency thing. It's the fact that you could, you could be on Instacart or DoorDash for 4 hours and make, 15, 20 deliveries. And that's just a higher frequency than the insurance company is willing to. They haven't figured out how to calculate it yet. So a lot of times they just throw their hands up in the air and say, we're not doing it.
Okay, thank you.
Not a problem.
Hi, Travis. My name is Yunus Jamil, and I am the owner of StarCab Taxi in Vermont here in South Burlington. So when I shop for the like taxi insurance or the commercial insurance, there aren't really many. There are like really a limited amount of insurances here, like in the area that's cover Vermont, and it seems like really like this kind of three major companies, they are really like dominating the market, if you want to say, and there isn't really no way to shop around and look for something really cheaper. So I would like you to see if we can help me, like see if we can find like some other insurances like other than those big ones that's cover Vermont and they are cheaper.
Yeah, no, I'd be happy to help you out afterwards and we can talk offline. Livery taxi service is very difficult. It is, you're correct. There's only a few companies that really like to do that. And again, it's because they perceive it as very high risk because of transporting individuals. But let's definitely connect and I can figure out, what you currently have and see if we might have some options for you. I'd be happy to help you there.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So if we're done with commercial auto, I'll move on to workers' comp insurance. So workers' compensation, the state of Vermont requires you, if you have an employee, to carry workers' comp insurance. Workers' compensation insurance is for covering an employee who gets hurt on the job. It'll pay lost wages. It'll pay for training, for any medical expenses or bills that they might have. So the state does require this of anyone that you hire as an employee. A couple of years ago, the state really cracked down because what was happening is a lot of businesses were hiring folks as contractors. They were independent contractors. So instead of being a W-2'd employee where you took out payroll tax and everything along those lines, they were 1099 individuals. And what the state figured out is that they were losing a lot of revenue from an unemployment tax standpoint, but there was also a lot of people that were operating without workers' comp insurance. So the classic scenario was in the contracting world. So a carpenter would 1099 all of his crew. and just say, oh, well, he's an independent contractor. He's an independent contractor. And what that would do for the carpenter or the contractor is, well, they wouldn't have to pay payroll tax, unemployment tax, and they wouldn't have to pay workers' compensation. The downside is now the individual, if one of these folks gets hurt on the job, they have no protection. They have no coverage. So the state really cracked down a couple of years ago with this, and they had a means testing. And basically, if that individual is a vital part of your operations, they're considered an employee. So how does that work? So if you're a carpenter and you're building a house, excuse me, and you have 4 carpenters on the job site, that's a vital part of your operation. They're employees, they're not contractors. If you're a carpenter, but you don't do electrical, and you bring an electrician in, that can be a contractor. Excuse me one second. So that's the means test. So if you are, if your business operations, let's say you're a painter, same scenario, and you have 4 people that come to a job site to help you finish painting the house, they're employees. They're not independent contractors. You can't 1099 them, and you need to have workers' comp insurance for them. So the state really cracked down on that a couple of years ago. So if you have employees, you are required to have workers' comp insurance. Now, as an individual business owner, you're not required to cover yourself. You can exclude yourself from workers' comp. You don't need to pay for workers' comp for yourself. You only need to pay for it on your employees. Now, the cost for workers' comp is driven by, similar to the liability, the type of work and the payroll amount. So the more dangerous the job, the more expensive the workers' comp is going to be. So if you have an individual who sits in an office all day working, that's the least expensive workers' comp quote in the world. It's called clerical. It's the cheapest workers' comp there is out there. If you have someone who does roofing, it's a different scenario. Someone who works on bridges, the more risk the job has, the more expensive the workers' comp is going to be. So the factoring, if you hire employees, this is the one thing I tell every business owner who doesn't have employees. If you're bringing in employees, start figuring out how much your workers' comp is going to cost before you hire them. I've had a lot of individuals who have gotten far down the road. They've already got payroll. They're already starting. They're getting ready. And then they're like, oh yeah, I need workers' comp insurance. And then I tell them how much it is. And they're like, holy cow, I wasn't planning on that. It can be, depending on the type of work, upwards of $20 per 100 in payroll if it is in some of these higher risk professions. So when you think about, you're going to pay someone $100 and now $20, you're going to pay them 20 more for workers' comp. So these are things that you have to factor in. Whereas like a clerical position, it's like 56 cents per 100. So again, it's really driven by the type of industry. So when you're evaluating growth and bringing on employees, really have those conversations early on about workers' comp, just so you can understand the cost of what that means to you. And again, workers' comp, there's a lot of different companies out there. There's a lot of different ways to pay workers' compensation. One of the best ways for people is they have what's called a pay-as-you-go program. So if you have a seasonal business, if you have a business where your payroll isn't the same every week, you can pay for what you use, basically is how it works. So if you know your payroll is going to be $500 that week, you can submit that to the workers' comp company and you pay just on that. So landscapers love it because maybe they're closed in the winter and they're only paying their workers' comp premiums during their busy months. Well, when they get slow and things are at a standstill, they're not paying premiums, so they can spread the cost around. So workers' comp can be very flexible when it comes to paying premiums. But again, if you don't have employees, you don't need to worry about it. If you're an individual, if you're a sole proprietor or a single member LLC and you're working, I would recommend disability insurance. You don't need workers' comp insurance. And the difference being workers' comp is only for on-the-job injuries. Disability insurance can cover you 24/7. So if you're an individual, you're working for yourself, I would recommend getting disability insurance, just because if you're home on the weekend not working and you get hurt, but you can't now go to work, disability would cover you for that. But as your employees, you can't, they wouldn't be covered that way. It would just be through workers' comp insurance. So if you're expanding, bringing on employees, definitely, think about that cost in advance and have that conversation before you get too far down the road.
Hey, Travis,
Yes.
how does, so the employer is responsible for providing that. How does the state know that the employer has it?
Well, unfortunately, they don't. So the only time it comes up is in a claim scenario.
Okay.
So if an individual gets hurt on the job, then there could be a situation where the individual goes to the hospital. I mean, we've heard horror stories of employers saying, well, we'll pay it out of pocket, send us the medical bills, things along those lines. The state, one thing the state does know is when you as an individual, as an LLC, so like I said, you can exclude yourself. So let's say you're an LLC residential cleaning company and you have 3 cleaners and yourself. You can exclude yourself from workers' comp coverage, but you need to file that exclusion with the state. So that can be a trigger for the state to realize that now maybe you have employees, but again, we're not sending workers' comp information to the state. So if you're the cleaning owner and you want to exclude yourself from workers' comp, we would file a form with the state. It goes to the Department of Labor and it says Travis Spencer of Spencer Cleaning is excluding himself from workers' comp coverage, and that's on file with the state. The reason you need to do that is more for the insurance company, because the workers' comp company will want to charge you for your income to cover you unless you're on file with the state. Because what can happen is an owner can say, well, I don't want to be covered, just because they don't want to pay the premiums for it, but they haven't gone through the process of filing that exclusion with the state. But yeah, the state won't know unless there is a situation that arises, and then then everything can start to come out. The state of Florida, it's expensive, but I know contractors who talk in the state of Florida, they actually pay people to drive around to job sites and check insurances.
Wow.
Now that's a huge undertaking. That's a huge expense. But it's something that the state of Florida decided they wanted to do, and they see a job site, new construction on a house or whatever, they'll pull in and they'll check insurance coverages. Because workers' comp, for a lot of businesses, it is the largest line item in their insurance portfolio. And a lot of people try to just navigate not having to pay for it or not have it. And it impacts the bids. So it's very popular in the contractor world. I know a lot of roofers who complain, and they're like, well, I know this guy doesn't have workers' comp, and that's why his pricing is different than mine. So unfortunately, there's not a state agency that is proactively checking on things. But again, that's a huge financial burden for the state. So it's more of a, if something happens, they'll find out type thing.
And if somebody wanted to game the system, so to speak, and not pay it, and an employee was injured and then sued the employer, I'm guessing that the liability coverage won't pay for that.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's not what that's intended for. It does not cover the owner or the employees.
Right.
So that opens a big can of worms. And the other thing with workers' comp insurance is the safer your work environment. So the longer you had workers' comp, and if you haven't had claims, your premiums can get discounted. So if you're a new business, you have no experience, you're going to pay a higher rate. But if you've been in business 5-10 years and you haven't had any claims, there's what's called an experience rating, and they can give you a discount on your comp because you have a safe work environment and your employees aren't getting injured. And there are a lot of bad claims, and we do our best to try to work with our customers. There's always the horror stories of an employee who got hurt on Sunday, then goes to work on Monday and claims he got hurt on Monday on the job. And then 3 months later, they're not an employee anymore. So there's a lot of different scenarios, and that's why workers' comp is very expensive. But we try to do our best to work with our our clients to, put together safety manuals, put together different things that can help benefit them to lower the cost of workers' comp.
Okay.
See a couple hands. I'll take those questions.
Yeah, I have a very part-time employee, and I was wondering if there are like is 15 hours a week, do I still need workers' comp?
Yeah, the only exclusion, and I don't know the number off my top of my head, is when it comes to farming.
Oh,
But-
great.
Anyone else, if you have a W-2 employee, there's really no exclusion as far as payroll.
Can you tell
yeah,
me about the farming exclusion? Because that's what my employee does.
Okay, there you go. I would need to get a little more detail because I don't run into it all the time, but I know I don't know the exact number. And you have my contact. If you have my contact information, you can email me and I can email you back. But I know
I actually am getting a quote from Crowley. So
okay.
yeah.
Yeah, so agricultural, because of the nature of agriculture and over the years, it was summertime, it was kids, it was whatever. And I don't know what the exact number is. For some reason, I want to think like $5,000 or $6,000, but there was a limit where if it was just like a summer help person and you were paying them to work in a field, and it was, that's where the exclusion is.
It's a low number.
It's a low number. Yeah.
Okay.
And it was more set up that way for, when agriculture back in the day was, the kids that lived on the farm worked on the farm. So they didn't have to really, instead of having to pay for workers' comp, it was just like, oh, as long as they're making under this, then don't worry about it.
Gotcha. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, Travis, I have another question.
Sure.
So yeah, I really hired, before I had as I said, a taxi business, and I had some people before, and I heard a lot of conflicting, really answers about getting workers' comp for my workers. Some of them, they said no, some of them you are not, obliged to have kind of employees having workers' comp. So, and also in one other scenario, I just sometimes lease the taxi to somebody. He pays me for example, a weekly.
Yep.
So do I have to pay for workers' comp?
So in the scenario where you're talking about leasing, in that situation, you probably don't need coverage. It's the same situation for a hair salon. So a hair salon has 4 booths. They might lease a booth to a barber or a stylist, and they pay them rent for that booth. And then that individual is responsible for their own insurance. So in your situation, if you're leasing the taxi to someone, are they 1099 employees? I mean, do you pay them, or they just pay you rent for the taxi?
They pay me just a weekly amount, and that's it.
Yep. So in that scenario, they're not really an employee of yours. I mean, they are truly an independent contractor. They're paying you to lease the taxi. Whatever revenue they get is theirs. They deal with it themselves, and they just pay you to rent the taxi. In that situation, you're probably free and clear from needing workers' comp, because they're technically not. Now it would be a different situation if they weren't paying you to lease, if you were bringing them in and they were driving for you, and then they were giving you all their proceeds, and at the end of the day, you were paying them. That would be a different story. But it's similar to the barbershop, to the hair salon situation. The stylist is charging whatever, they're collecting the money, and then they're paying the owner of the salon money to rent it. So it's kind of a similar situation. So I think you would be in the clear when it comes to needing workers' comp, because they're not really employees of yours. They're leasing product from you, or leasing a vehicle from you.
So how many of they said that if you have only one driver for you, works for you, you are not supposed to pay the workers' comp. Is that true?
I'd have to get more details on your situation, but if they're working for you, again, I mean, the big factor is going to be, are you paying them? Are you paying them directly, or are they, it's like a sales job. I mean, there's some car dealerships where the salespeople are 1099. They go out and they sell a car, they get the money, they're responsible for their own taxes. Those individuals don't need workers' comp insurance. But if it's a different situation where it's a W-2'd employee and you're taking out the taxes, sounds like you might have a gray area there. And I could definitely look into that and get a little more detail on your situation. But when we talk about other stuff, I can look at that as well. But if it's a situation where they're paying you just to lease the vehicle and that's it, then you're probably, in the clear there. But if there's other contractual things going on, then you might have some issue.
All right, thank you.
Any other workers' comp questions?
I
Okay,
have a
Oh,
question. Yeah,
sure.
Okay. I have a question about the disability insurance. So can you just speak briefly to that, and if it's possible, give a sense about what the cost range is for that could
Sure.
be?
So disability insurance is for most disability policies, is a 24/7 type of insurance. So workers' comp only covers you while you're on the job. Disability insurance can cover you all day, all night. Disability insurance for a business owner is usually a lot cheaper than if they were to pay for workers' comp insurance to cover themselves, and it gives them broader coverage. Now, in regards to pricing, again, disability insurance is going to be based off from what your job is. So it could run the gamut as far as costs, but it is less expensive than workers' comp. It's not something that we do. We work with companies that do life insurance and disability insurance, and we always recommend the business owners purchase that through them, just because they don't need the workers' comp coverage. But it's usually a monthly premium. And again, depending on your type of work, it could be anywhere from $30 to $40 a month, or if it's a more dangerous, risky job, above that. But again, the advantage is it's 24/7. So if you are an individual business owner, and you're in a business where you need to be at work, if it's an active physical job and you get hurt on the weekend off the job, you really don't have much. So that's why I highly recommend disability, just because it is that around the clock coverage.
But you're not required to provide disability insurance to your employees, correct?
Nope, not required. Just workers' comp. If you have employees, workers' comp. I know some businesses offer voluntary, like, disability insurance, and again, that would cover your employee off the job, but that's not something that's required.
Okay.
That's more of a benefit.
And somebody can obviously get that even if they're not in business, correct?
Correct. Yep. Yeah. Any individual can purchase disability insurance. That's not a problem.
Now, will you get into unemployment insurance as well? Will you talk about that?
I don't, just because we don't. It's not something we do. That's something when you file, you have to, you file that and deal with that through the state.
Okay.
And that really was what the state was trying to crack down on, more than the workers' comp piece just became ancillary to the state realizing there was a lot of people not paying unemployment tax. So that was the bigger issue. So that was the workaround of why the state really started cracking down on workers' comp a couple of years ago. So the next piece, what I'll move on to, is business personal property. Again, this is a small piece. If you don't have any property, business property, then it's, obviously it's not going to impact you. But if you own a building, if you own supplies, inventory, equipment, this would all want to be covered under business personal property. So for a lot of people, this can be combined with your general liability insurance. So you don't need a separate policy. You can get one policy that has the liability and your business personal property. Business personal property can be simple as office equipment, desk, chairs, filing cabinets, supplies that you have in your business. And it can run all the way up to, if you're a landscaper who has 4 lawnmowers, a tractor, heavy equipment, things along those lines. So anything that's used in your day-to-day business operations would be covered under business personal property. So we can include that in the general liability piece for most people. And that's, let's say you have an office space and you have $10,000 in office equipment. We just include that on there. When you have higher valued items, you want to what's called schedule those on your insurance policy. And the reason you do that is to make sure that they're properly covered. So for my landscaper situation, it's very easy to have a $20,000, $30,000 piece of equipment as a landscaper, and you want to make sure that's insured properly. So what we do is we schedule it as a line item on the insurance policy. So it would say, Toro 0-turn mower, here's the serial number, here's the value. And some of these landscapers have sheets of what's called scheduled property. And we do that just to make sure that if something happens to that particular mower, we know what it is, we're calculating it properly, it's insured for the right amount. So any high-end equipment, I have some medical offices who have x-ray machines, things along those lines that are a lot more expensive than just your general office equipment. And so we schedule those on that policy for business personal property. So it can fall under the general liability. It can also have a separate policy, what's called an inland marine policy, where we would list all of those high value items. For just a general office space or, counter space in a retail store, it's really inexpensive to add that stuff onto your general liability policy. But when we start talking about higher end items, a lot of items, we want to make sure we're scheduling all of those and accounting for those properly. So that's most business personal property. Most people will fall under their general liability, a small amount, but it is those larger landscapers, manufacturers, anyone that has a lot of equipment. We want to make sure that we break that stuff out individually. So that would be covered under the business personal property. For people, back to the people that work at home, if you work from home in an office environment, most homeowners policies will give you $5,000 to $10,000 coverage for what's called business personal property. So if you are a consultant that works from home and you just have a computer and some office equipment, you can usually get the equipment piece covered under your homeowners. That's not going to cover that's different from your general liability or professional liability, but it would at least cover those things that you're using in your home for business. With people now working remotely, I know for us anyway, like everyone's taking their laptops home, or during the beginning of the pandemic, people were working from home. It was really important for us to make sure that our employees had that type of coverage on their homeowners or renters policies, just because they were working remotely with our laptops and our equipment. We wanted to make sure those things were covered properly when they were taken. One other thing to mention to people, going back to John, you were talking earlier about personal property and personal insurance. Auto insurance does not cover personal property. So I just want everyone to be aware that if you have something in your car and it gets stolen from your car insurance does not cover that. So this goes back to the whole renters thing. And one of the things why I really like to talk about renters insurance is your auto insurance doesn't protect you if you have personal belongings in your vehicle that get stolen. So again, that's kind of the same thing with business property. So if you leave a laptop bag in your car and someone breaks into your car and steals that, that's not going to be protected under your auto insurance. So it's really important that you have, if it's a personal item, renters or homeowners, or you make sure you have proper coverage through your business insurance. The other thing with business personal property, that gets an additional thing that can get thrown on with the general liability, is if you deliver products, there's coverage for products in transit. So let's say you're a caterer. A lot of times the insurance covers for your place of business. So you have a cake shop, everything in the cake shop's covered. But now what we're doing is we're delivering from point A to point B. You want to make sure that you have coverage for goods in transit. And that's just an add-on coverage that we get for people. It happens a lot with actually insure a jeweler, and she delivers the jewelry to people sometimes. And so if you're talking about a several $1,000 ring that's in the car, it's not physically at the store anymore. So we want to make sure that while it's in her vehicle going to the customer, that's covered. So again, if you're in the business of moving materials from one location to another, insurance is really designed for that primary location. And that's how it's usually looked at and insured. So you want to make sure if you are moving goods and materials that we're accounting for that properly. So does anyone have any questions about business property? And of course, business property can mean a building. So if you do own a building, we would insure the building separately from your general liability. So if you own your physical store or your garage or your warehouse or whatever, that's insured on a separate property policy that's separate from the general liability policy.
I have a question, Travis, about
Sure.
that. You said the value. Can you talk more about that specifically? Are we talking about like a depreciated value over time or replacement value?
So replacement cost. And that's why we like to we schedule those higher valued items. So we want to know that zero turn mower costs $20,000. It's replacement cost coverage. It's not depreciation. So if that mower gets stolen, we're going to pay for you to go out and replace the mower. They're not going to say, well, the mower was 10 years old. Now it's only worth $3,000 and you're kind of stuck with the difference. So it is replacement cost.
Thank you.
And the other thing too with property, this is specifically to buildings. When we insure the building, so let's say your business owns a building and you have your business liability and you have insurance on the building, there is separate liability coverage attached to that property. So if you own a warehouse at 123 Main Street and we have a building property on that, there's liability on that coverage. So if someone goes into that property and gets hurt, it would fall under there as well, not necessarily your business policy. So there is additional liability coverage on building property policies as well.
Hey, Travis, I have.
Oh, go ahead.
Travis, hi, I have a question. So I had some issues with my insurance, my home insurance, where I had some mold inside, and like in the condo, and I told them about it, and they said, well, really, it's not covered. It's not something that comes really like all at once. It's not like a fire or like a flood or something. They said this has built like over the time and stuff like that, and they didn't really want to pay for the repair. So, and they said, no, you really have to talk to the association, like the condo
Yep.
association, because this mold is coming from the outside. And when I called the associations, they said, no, it's not our problem. It's just like one pass the ball to another. They just don't want to deal with with the damage that I have, both of them. So now I have to hire a lawyer to get really involved in this issue so I can resolve this problem.
Well, most home policies will pay for up to $10,000 in mold damage. And mold is capped. It's capped on all policies. So if you have $50,000 in mold damage, unfortunately, the policy wouldn't pay for that. But every homeowner's policy that we write, there's $10,000, up to $10,000 in mold coverage. So you might have more than that, you might have less, but that's what the policies usually pay. Condo associations can get tricky, obviously, because they're, it's where did it start? Did it start in the wall? Is it start something, that the condo association should address? Normally what I would recommend to my client would be to put a claim in with your condo insurance, your personal one, and then have them go and try to put a claim against the condo association and find out where did this leak come from. Is it because of the condo association? Is it something that was in the original construction? Or is it something that I did? Because that's what they should be doing. I mean, your insurance company, you'd start with them, file a claim with them, and then they should then work with the condo association to try to get them to pay for it if they're at fault, or at the very least pay out up to the 10,000 for mold damage. But
Okay.
it sounds like they should be working a little harder for you than they are.
They didn't. They ignored me, and that's why I put, I resort to the lawyer to to resolve this issue. But I have travelers for home insurance, and they came here and they did some kind of inspection, and they just they said, it's not our problem, so we are not gonna pay for the repair of the damage. So talk to your association. The association, they said, no, it's not inside. It's inside, not outside. So we're not going to pay for it.
Yeah, that's where it always becomes tricky. But the lawyer will get involved and help. But I would try to push, or what I would do is file a claim through Travelers, and then go from there and have Travelers work more with the condo association instead of you trying to be the person in the middle going back and forth.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Travis,
Yes.
me in here to Yusef's point. If somebody is like in between and stuck like that between insurance agencies, are there places in the state that they can go to get assistance through the state, whether that's the Attorney General or the Banking and Insurance Commission?
So you can file a complaint with the insurance board. To be honest with you, I've found it doesn't really help you too much. It's more, it goes on record, and I don't think you're going to get too far with them. Unfortunately, I think the recourse does end up being an attorney getting involved. As an agent, personally, I would push the insurance company to file a claim and go out, and then, like I said, there's up to $10,000 mold coverage on most policies. So I would always say, hey, let's go get started. Let's see what we can do. And then if we find out the condo association or the other parties involved, has a problem, we'll take it from there and try to go after them. There's just not a lot of resources in the state other than filing complaints or putting a complaint with like the Better Business Bureau or the Insurance Commission. At the end of the day, those don't really go too far, other than, it just becomes a resource for people to look and say, okay, well, has this company had any complaints? It's more a reactionary thing than a proactive, they're going to help us solve the problem. It's more for someone who's shopping. Now maybe they go and they see, this company's had a lot of complaints. I don't really want to do business with them. Okay, which we do see. I mean, we see people who, they're like, we don't want to work with this company because we did some research and they have a lot of complaints. All right, the next piece I'll get into is cyber liability. So this is the last topic for the day, and it's another topic that has a handout in the email. And the reason being, cyber liability has gotten more and more popular over the last couple of years because more and more stuff is housed electronically. Everyone knows the big situations, the Hannaford breaches, or the breaches where someone used their card at a store and information was stolen. So everyone knows the high level ones. The state of Vermont had one recently where they sent out unemployment benefit information to wrong people with social security numbers, those types of things. But what happens now with businesses is most businesses do keep personal information somewhere, on a laptop, on a desktop, in a filing cabinet. And a lot of times, that could potentially be hacked. People could, steal a laptop out of a car that has personal information. So it's gone further from, I used to hear from a lot of people, well, I don't take payment. I don't have a POS system where I swipe a credit card, so I don't have to worry about it. But unfortunately, the impact is more than just taking a payment. I don't know if anyone remembers a couple of years ago, Wendell's Furniture had they had a cyber attack. And basically it was a ransomware situation where they could not access their computer system. And because of that, they couldn't make deliveries. They had nothing. They were blind. They didn't know. They got to the point where they're telling people, hey, call us if you're expecting a delivery, because we can't access our calendar. We can't access any information. So that's a cyber attack. That's a hack. So if you retain any customer information, name, address, date of birth, if you retain credit card information, any type of banking information, you're at risk of potentially being hacked and having that information stolen. Now, I think it's slowly starting to trickle down, where it was started at some of the bigger name companies who process a lot of credit cards, where now it's very easy to potentially attack mom and pop locations, smaller stores that maybe have a credit card machine, just because they're not updating their systems or they're not updating their security. So cyber liability has become more and more popular as more and more information is out there electronically. And a lot of companies, before, you could only buy a separate cyber liability policy, but now a lot of companies are including that as an addition to your general liability. So it's an endorsement where you can get cyber liability. It usually goes in $25,000 increments. Most companies will start at 25, and you can go all the way up to $1 million. It's really tough to determine how much coverage you need, just because you're required, if you have a breach, to notify every person that you had a record on. And if they want it, you are required to pay for credit monitoring for a year. So a lot of times people will say, well, how many records do you have in your file? It's probably going to cost you around $100 per record. That's a good place to start. But the other thing that it will do, cyber liability, and I don't know if Wendell's had it or not. My hope is that they would. But one thing that cyber liability pays for is for you to rebuild So your credibility goes down if you've had a cyber attack. Well, your cyber liability insurance will help pay for you to do some advertising, to do community outreach that says, hey, here are the steps we've taken. Because once your name gets out there being, losing personal information, it could really be detrimental to your business. So the cyber liability insurance has that component into it, where it'll pay for the notification to individuals, it'll pay for credit monitoring, it'll pay for any defense fees that you have for an attorney, it'll pay for any goodwill or just trying to get your name back as far as building up your credibility in the community again. The other thing it will pay for is if there is a ransomware situation where they're demanding, we want $5,000 to release your computer, because that's basically what happened at Wendell's. It was they just couldn't access their computer, and so they were just locked out and they were waiting. They believe that's what happened at UVM when UVM Medical Center was down. I don't know if we ever got the full story, but I think there was some belief that there was some ransomware stuff going on there as well. So again, it's becoming more and more popular. It's becoming more available now. Before, it only used to be people who had a lot of transactions, credit card machines, data companies, IT companies, but now it's becoming more popular for everyday business owners to have this coverage, just because if you have customer information, you're at risk. So there is a write-up in the handout that kind of goes over some different scenarios. It can be like I said, it can be as simple as someone doing an email out to your clients, and it includes personal information. Now everyone has it. Similar to what happened with the state, it can be a stolen laptop. It could be someone breaking into your facility and stealing files that have personal information. There's a lot of different scenarios where you could run into, just a cyber liability claim possibly. It doesn't just have to be someone hacking into your system. There's a lot of other things that could happen. Does anyone have any questions about cyber?
I do actually. I'm curious about it, and I might need to just do a little more research into my own provider, but some of the big programs like Shopify and Etsy, do they wrap that into their services? I kind of assumed they did.
Yeah, so a lot of times, this is so I'll give you the non-insurance agent answer and then the insurance agent answer. My wife and I have a online business as well, where a retail business. And though if you're using those third-party card processors, you technically don't have, I don't have the payment information. So we use Stripe. So Stripe processes the credit card. We can go in and we can see who's paid us, how much it was. We can do refunds, we can do stuff like that. But we don't actually have their credit card information. That's housed within Stripe. And in theory, Stripe would be responsible if something was to happen. Now, the insurance side of me will say it wouldn't take much for someone who you did business with and there was a breach to say, well, it was your responsibility. You didn't do a good job vetting your third-party vendor that you use, and potentially come after you. But I personally would say the risk really is on that third party, as long as you're not retaining, you're not processing credit cards yourself. It's going through a third party, through your website, through Etsy or whatever platform it might be. As long as you're not housing that information, you should be good to go. But again, anything's possible. and at the end of the day, that's kind of to wrap it up here with some of the insurance stuff. Our job is to tell you all the pitfalls, and we understand as a business owner, we obviously are like, hey, here's the 20 things you should have. But we know that there's probably, as a, whether it's a startup or a growing business, you really have to pick and choose what's the priority and what you can afford financially. So we would always say some is better than none. So if you can get $25,000 or $50,000 of cyber coverage, for a small amount, it's better than not having any. Ideally, maybe you need 200,000, but at the same time, we got to start somewhere. So our goal is to really tell you what you should have, and then kind of go from there and work with you as you evolve. Does anyone have any other cyber questions? Yes.
So I'm curious, is there a difference between information? Sounds like there is, but difference between getting, say, customer information that might include address, email, but no credit card information versus just the credit card information?
There is. And so I'm looking at my cheat sheet here. What do they call it? Personally identifiable information, and then protected health information. So everyone knows HIPAA. So if you are in that situation, if you're in a medical situation where you have medical, you have a client's file and you have medical information in there, and that gets out, obviously that's a HIPAA situation and a cyber liability. And I guess the thing with cyber, we call it cyber, but it's more data breach as well. So individual data has been compromised or stolen. And it's the same thing for personally identifiable information. So if you have name, address, email, name, address, date of birth, that stuff gets taken as well, there's the potential that, that identity could be stolen and someone could easily do something there.
Thank you.
You're welcome. One thing I will, if there's no other questions on cyber, just a couple points of interest from an insurance world and advice to small business owners. Social media presence. If it's not part of your business, don't put it on social media. And the reason I say this is insurance companies will, first thing they're going to do is Google you. So whatever your business is, whatever your name is, and we have a lot of insurance carriers, and they'll be like, I had someone one time who was going to start a car detailing business, and the insurance company came back to me and said, did you Google this individual? I said, no. And they had some assault charge and had prison time and this and that. And I was like, okay. But insurance companies are, they're doing research. They're evaluating you as an individual. They're evaluating your business. The one that we run into a lot is, as a startup, obviously, you're trying to financially make sure you're doing things properly. So a lot of businesses will buy like an off-the-shelf website. So you might go to Wix or GoDaddy, or you might hire someone. And let's say you're a carpenter, and you just set up this default website. The pictures on the website aren't you, the projects aren't you, but there's a guy standing on a roof with a hammer. Well, the insurance company's like, well, they do roofing? And you're like, no, they don't do roofing. They just do interior carpentry. Well, their website has a picture of a guy on the roof with a hammer. So if you're not in the business of doing it, make sure it's not on your website, because insurance companies will go out and they'll look at your website. They'll see what you're doing. I have a client who occasionally cuts down trees. It's not his primary business. The insurance company knows he occasionally does it, but he loves to post videos on Facebook of him cutting down trees. And I had to tell him, can you stop doing that? I go, just because the insurance company, they know you do it, but now they're seeing a lot of these videos, and it potentially could put your insurance at risk, because now they're thinking, okay, well, this isn't just occasional. You're posting these pictures all the time. So your social media presence, your website presence is very important, not just from a marketing standpoint, but from the standpoint of your insurance company. It's not something I'm a big fan of as an insurance agent, but insurance companies are going to go out and they're going to see, are you representing what you truly do for your business on your Facebook page, on your website, and different platforms. So just a rule of thumb, we've run into it a lot of times. Also, the titling of your company. We had a guy who named his company, whatever his name was, roofing, but he actually only did like 10% roofing. And the insurance company's like, well, he's got roofing in his name, he must do more than 10%. And I was like, well, no, but, and so again, they just really dig deep and evaluate, because they want to understand what they're insuring. And because at the end of the day, like I said, it's $1 million. This is what I always tell people. The insurance company is putting $1 million bet on you that your business is not going to mess up or is going to be run properly. And so if you're that carpenter who's paying $1,200 a year, the return is $1 million in coverage. So they really want to make sure that they know who they're doing business with, and that you're kind of being above board with things. So that would be my last piece of advice as far as how you promote yourself, because the dirty truth is insurance companies are looking to see how you represent your business and what your business is. So is there any other, I know we're ahead of schedule, but are there any other questions or? If anyone has questions, my email and phone number are in the chat. Feel free to email me and email me any questions you have. I guess the biggest thing I want people to understand is I'm not doing this to hope that one day you become a client of Kinney Insurance. I'm doing this just to help you guys out and educate you a little bit on insurance. So if you're happy with your current insurance agent, but you feel like you're missing something as far as an answer, feel free to email me. I'll be happy to do some research. I'll be happy to answer those questions. Like I said, my wife and I started a candle business 3 years ago. I understand the work that it takes to start a business from zero. And the bumps that are along the road. So I'll be more than happy to help out any way I can with any problems or questions you have. And I am a good resource. If I know John and his team have wonderful resources, but if you ever need help with connections on, marketing, websites, attorneys, taxes. We run in a pretty big circle of people, and a lot of them are willing to help out.
That's great to know, Travis. I just, I received an email just today from somebody who's looking for website resources, and I'm putting together a list for her, so I'll add you to the list.
Thank you, Travis. Really appreciate your time and expertise on this. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Not a problem. I'm looking forward to the next time we can have one in person.
Me too.
yeah.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Travis. I will call you. I will call you differently. I would love to give you some business.
Yeah, well, thanks. I'd love to help you out and answer your questions.
Yes,
And
Thank
good
you
luck to
so
everyone
much.
in whatever it is you're doing, and wish you success.
Thank you, everyone, for attending, and thank you, Travis, for your time. Really appreciate it.
Before everybody logs off, I would just like to say, and thank you for Rachel for putting this up here. We do have another workshop coming up on May 20th. We have an introduction to business taxes. There is no fee for that, and you'll see in the chat that Rachel provided, there's a link there if you would like to register. If you have questions about business taxes, it'll be very informative, so feel free. Bye, Zoom.
Rachel, can you send us the email too, right?
I'll send
Okay.
that in the follow-up to this.
All right, thank you. Thank you, John, for doing this. Thank you, John.
Yeah, good seeing you. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, everybody. That was nice to meet you all.
You too. Yusuf.
Great, thanks.
Hey, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.